So let's talk about a story that sits right at the very foundation of Western civilization. It's a story about how one single brutal act of violence against one woman lit the fuse on a revolution. A revolution that didn't just end a dynasty, but actually gave birth to one of the most influential governments in all of history. This is the story of Lucretia. Okay, let's dive in.
It sounds kind of impossible, right? How could the fate of an entire political system really hang on one single personal tragedy? But that's exactly what the legend of Lucretia is all about. It really makes you wonder how private suffering can become the spark for massive public outrage. To get the full picture, we've got to go way, way back. The year is 509 BCE. Rome isn't the empire we all think of yet, not even close. It's a kingdom, and believe me, it is teetering right on the edge of a cliff.
All right, so to understand what happens to Lucretia, you first have to get the vibe of the city she was living in. And it was basically a political pressure cooker. Rome was being ruled by its seventh and final king, a man who went down in history as Tarquin the Proud. And oh, he absolutely earned that name. You see, Tarquin wasn't governing, he was intimidating. This wasn't about law, it was about fear. If you were a senator and you disagreed with him, you might just get executed. If he wanted your land, he'd just take it, no trial necessary. And the Roman Senate, the institution that was supposed to advise the king, he just ignored it. So you've got the powerful noble families feeling totally disrespected, and the common people feeling completely oppressed. The whole city was just simmering with resentment, you know? It just needed one little thing to make it boil over.
And that one little thing, that spark, came from the most unlikely place you can imagine, a drunken bet between a bunch of soldiers. The king's army was camped outside a city called Ardea, and the king's sons and their friends, all young noblemen, were bored. So they started arguing about which one of their wives was the most virtuous.
And they decide, hey, let's settle this. They hop on their horses and gallop back to Rome, totally unannounced, to spy on their wives. And what do they find? Most of the wives are at these huge, lavish parties, just living it up. But then they get to the home of Lucretia, and it is a totally different scene. She's at home, late at night, surrounded by her maids, just quietly and diligently working her wool. She was the perfect picture of Roman domestic virtue. So she wins the bet for her husband, Collatinus. But her perfect virtue, well, it caught the eye of the king's son, Sextus Tarquinius, and not in a good way. He couldn't get the image of her out of his head. So a few days later, he rides back to her house, this time all by himself. Now, because he was a close relative of her husband, they welcomed him in as a guest of honor. They gave him dinner, they gave him a room for the night. They had absolutely no idea what he was really planning.
In the dead of night, when the whole house was asleep, Sextus snuck into Lucretia's bedroom. He had his sword drawn, he presses it against her, wakes her up, and starts whispering threats, demanding that she submit to him. But she refused. Even with a sword to her chest, she refused.
But Sextus, he had a much, much darker threat up his sleeve. He told her, okay, if you keep resisting, I won't just kill you. I'll kill one of your male slaves too. Then I'll place both of your naked bodies together, and I'll tell everyone I caught you in the act of adultery and killed you both.
And you have to understand, this was so much more than a threat against her life. This was a threat against her honor, her reputation, her entire family's name for generations to come. In Roman society, that kind of public shame, even if it was a lie, was a fate far, far worse than death. She was trapped. Sextus assaulted her, and then he just left.
What happens next is what turns this horrific private crime into the single event that sparks a national revolution. Lucretia's response wasn't just born of grief, it was strategic. It was powerful. As soon as it was morning, she sent urgent messages to her husband, Collatinus, and to her father back in Rome. She told them both to come immediately and to each bring a man they trusted. When they got there, they found her dressed in mourning clothes, just completely overcome with sorrow. She told them exactly what Sextus had done, and then she made them all swear an oath that they would get revenge.
Her family, of course, they try to console her. They tell her, this is not your fault. The mind is what sins, not the body. And since you didn't consent, you are innocent. But for Lucretia, that wasn't enough.
She told them that even though she knew she was innocent in her heart, she had to absolve herself of blame with her death. Why? Because she refused to be an example that any other unchaste woman in the future could point to as an excuse to live. And before anyone could stop her, she pulled out a dagger she had hidden in her dress and plunged it into her heart.
This moment. This is what changes everything for one of the men in that room, Lucius Junius Brutus. Now, Brutus had spent years pretending to be a simple-minded fool just to survive King Tarquin's deadly paranoia. But watching Lucretia die, he dropped the act. He strode forward, pulled the bloody dagger from her chest, held it high, and swore a solemn oath to drive the entire Tarquin family out of Rome and end the monarchy for good.
And that was the turning point. Brutus took Lucretia's body, carried it into the Roman Forum, the public square, and he showed the people of Rome the terrible price of the king's tyranny. A family's private grief had just become a very public cause.
And the reaction was just explosive. It was immediate. I mean, look how fast this all happened. The people of Rome, already fed up with Tarquin, just rose up in revolt. When the king heard about it and rushed back from the army camp, he found the city gates barred against him. Then, his own army heard the story and they deserted him. In a matter of days, the whole monarchy just crumbled.
And in its place, the Romans created something brand new, the Roman Republic. The entire idea behind it was to make sure that no single man could ever hold that kind of absolute power again. So they replaced the king with two leaders, called consuls, who would share power and could only serve for 1 year. And who were the very first two consuls? The revolutionary Brutus and Lucretia's own grieving husband, Collatinus.
Lucretia never got to see the republic that she was the catalyst for. But her story became its founding myth. It became this incredibly powerful symbol that would echo down through the centuries.
And I mean, her story just gets told over and over again. Christian thinkers like St. Augustine wrote about the morality of her suicide. Renaissance artists, we're talking Titian, Rembrandt, they were obsessed with painting her final moments. Shakespeare wrote a whole famous poem about her. Even centuries later, during the French Revolution, they used her story as a rallying cry against their own kings. She became this timeless symbol of virtue being violated by tyranny.
So, at the end of the day, what does this all teach us? I think it's this. Abstract political issues, like a king ignoring the Senate, that's often not enough to really get a revolution started. It takes a deeply personal, deeply human story to make the cost of tyranny feel real, immediate, and just unbearable.
And that's the ultimate, tragic irony of her story, isn't it? The act that destroyed her was meant to be a private, ugly display of a tyrant's power. Instead, her death became the most public, most powerful rejection of that power you could possibly imagine.
It's a story from over 2,500 years ago, but it leaves us with a question that feels just as relevant today. We see it all the time, don't we? Stories of individual injustice suddenly go viral and spark huge movements. It really makes you think, in our own world, what private tragedies still hold that same power to ignite profound public change?